Well, good evening. It's martini time. So, what am I going to talk about tonight? Well, the only way I can do this is that if I use my everyday life as the ingredients for this meal. And so the only thing, I live a very mundane, boring life, so the little things I have to use. So the little thing I'm going to use tonight is that my lower plate, well, I'll tell you about it. Anyway, so I have a lower plate, and it started hitting the top of my gums. Ow! So it was like I was biting myself. So I was thinking, well, I'm going to have to take my plate back to the dentist and have him fix that. Well, then I dropped it, and the tooth broke off. There were 4 little teeth there. The tooth broke off, and it happened to be the tooth that was biting me. So I said, oh, good. I don't have to take it back to the dentist. But then the broken part was a little sharp, so then I started biting my lip. Well, okay, so the dentist has it, and I'll pick it up tomorrow. So I got to meditating on this. If you remember, we talked yesterday about leading with the virgin, leading with the female. In order to catch the unicorn, you have to put the virgin in the empty mind. You have to put the empty mind in the forest, and the insight will come and lay its head in your lap, you see. So this is what's leading with listening, leading with receptivity, leading with curiosity. Everything in our world is potentially pearls of wisdom. Everything, there's no little or big, everything has this potential because everything is interrelated and life is one. So it's not like, I would only have interesting things if I go to California, but here in Blackstone it's just like a wasteland. Well, that's not true. There's just as much potential where you are as anywhere else because all life is one. Okay, so I got to meditating on, when I say meditating, I say just looking at it with curiosity to see what it reveals to me. And what I noticed was that this is the gap in my self-image. If I were embarrassed about my self-image, I would be, holding or trying to talk, like this. See, I'm trying to talk to hide it. You see, not move my lips too much because I don't want you to see the gap. You see, because there's pain in that. So if there's any this is a I even whistle when I talk. This is an analogy or a metaphor. So it's something that we're using to get our hands into this idea or inquiry into what is the cause of our suffering, what is the cause of our pain and my dissatisfaction with life and myself. What is the cause of that? And this is the whole Buddha Dharma. It's the investigation into the real cause of our dissatisfaction and feeling of being incomplete, you see, because we suffer from this because we have the fallacy of the misplaced cause. Something else is causing it. Someone else, the world, my body, or something else is causing it. So we never arrive at the end of suffering. It's always temporary, and then something else starts and we're off to running again. We can notice that. So the analogy here is that the loss of 2 teeth, you see, is a gap in my self-image. Now, the truth is that I don't have 2 teeth. That's it. There's no pain in that. There's no suffering in that. The suffering comes when there is a gap between what is and my imagination of what should be, which would be a perfect smile, you see. So the distance between that what is and the image of what should be, the distance between that is the measurement of our suffering. It could be just a little bit, or it could be really big, you see. So there's a degree of suffering is the gap between what is, because there's no suffering in what is. We're not talking about physical pain. We're talking about psychological pain here. So there's no suffering. In fact, my mouth feels pretty good. See, so there's no suffering in what is. The suffering comes is when we compare what is with what should be. Boom. There we go. And the greater the degree of distance between those, you see, is the measurement of our dissatisfaction and suffering in life. And of course, now what we do with this gap, so here's what is, and here's what should be. So what should be is when the dentist gets my tooth fixed, which will be tomorrow, and I go back over it tomorrow, and he sticks it in, and I'll make sure I don't bite myself anymore. So there's time now between what is, the pain of what is, the imagined pain of what is, and when I will be free from that. When the image of what should be and what is comes back together, and then I'll have a nice smile and all that, you see. But so that when we get this distance, you see, then we have to have we have time. This creates time. There's no time in just this. There's no time right here, just us, just this. The time comes in when I can imagine a better this, a better image with no thing, you see. So that, right now, if I was self-conscious, if I was felt deficient or judged or looked at with amusement, that little look he's got, so old guy's got missing some teeth, you know. So if that imagined objectivity of me would create a gap between what is, where there's no suffering, and suffering, and then I would have to do something to close the gap to get rid of the suffering. So we can watch this in everything. It's very observable if we become curious about how the operating system of the mind generates mental suffering. You see, you can see this. You can watch it if you're curious about it. If you're not curious about it, most people aren't. They just blame everything, self or something. The external world or myself has to be blamed for the pain or dissatisfaction I'm feeling, you see. And then we have strategies to get rid of it. Either I get therapy or I drink a martini, see? Or I remove the pain, or I mask the pain, or I get a facial, I get, something. So our whole life is filled with strategies to close the gap between what actually is and what should be. We can see that, and it's important that we begin to be curious about that. Because when you begin to be curious about it, you're not interested in getting to the point where you don't have, getting to that future, the image of what should be in the future. You become interested in what is. See, what is how we are manufacturing psychological pain. That's what is. So when I become curious about that, and that's the virgin. The virgin is that receptive, curious, open, non-opinionated, non-judgmental, empty mind, an empty womb, not wound, empty womb, that is curious about what is. That is the mind that attracts the insight of the unicorn. And we all experience this, but I'm just giving you a little metaphor, a little map in which to kind of like hold it together and get an image about it, and kind of like, oh, that makes it so, that's so clear. That's such a good way to see something. Yes, and when we have a good way to see something, it becomes a truth. and it begins to work on us, and we start, and it begins to be activated. It's kind of like when you get a credit card, and it's no good. It's a new credit card. You have to call in to activate it. And when you call in and activate it, you can use its power. There's power in that card. You can't use it if you don't activate it. So what I work with is basically ways of seeing ourselves and our suffering in the world that activate the power of truth in us. Not in the world, not in other people, but in me and in you. Truth is a power that liberates you from the suffering of ignorance and a lack of understanding, you see. So truth is not something to be learned and memorized and written down and passed and passing a test on. Truth is a activation of reality, activation of love, activation of compassion for yourself in the present moment, which liberates you from the gap between what is and what should be, which is all a creation of our mind, you see. We're blessed with an imagination that's a curse and a blessing. The curse is that we create alternate realities to what is. What is the truth. But we create alternate facts, alternate realities, you see, and then create strategies to make the alternate reality come truth because we don't want to look directly at what is. So we avoid what is by creating alternate realities in our mind in future and then develop a strategy to get to it. But when we get to it, we're still with what is, and a new suffering arises. We never get out of it, you see, because we never come to rest in what is. There's no pain, not physical pain. There is no psychological pain in what is, because what is all there can be. What is, there is no alternative to what is. There is no alternative facts or reality or truth, or there is no future. There is always just what is. Future is imagined. So let that be our martini for today, and I'll see you in the morning for our moment of Zen, which I'm kind of changing. Buddha's in the landfill, and I'm kind of evolving it more into our moment of Zen, because what I've just talked about is a moment of Zen. Zen is the moment when you see what is, and nothing else, just what is. Wow, I just see what is. So I'll see you in the morning.